Hey there, sweet friends. Welcome to the Peacock Homestead. If you are new here, my name is Elizabeth. This will be the second to last video of the pantry challenge, and we are in week 7. So that is pretty amazing how time flies. I'll be cooking meals from scratch. I also wanted to show you how I incorporate my homemade cheese into meals. And I'll be making a dinner with my homegrown veg. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, let's get into the video. I like to have one major bake day because I work for the rest of the week, so I usually pick Sundays for baking. And for this week, I'm choosing to make my universal dough recipe, and I'm going to be making some hot dog buns and hamburger rolls. So when I come home after work, I can just pop a bun from the freezer into the microwave. And then all I have to do is heat up a hot dog on the stove, or just pop a chicken patty or some leftover meat on a bun, and that will be a perfect, easy on-the-go meal. So I just mix this up until the dough comes together, which is about 5 minutes. So the gluten can form, and then I'll cover that up and let it rest for an hour. And when I come back, it's pretty puffy. So then I'm just gonna punch that down and shape it. I'm gonna be making about 2 loaves of bread and a few hot dog rolls and probably 3 hamburger rolls. I think for next week, I want to try something new with my sourdough, either make baguettes or boules or something. That sounds super interesting. And then you can put soup in them and whatnot. That sounds super delicious. I've actually made sub rolls with this, or sausage rolls. You can make this any shape you want. So I'm just gonna try to cut it into 3 equal pieces, and then 2 of those are gonna be loaves of bread. And then I was gonna just use the leftover to make my hamburger buns and my hot dog rolls. Now, on my bread making journey, I've used a bunch of different flours throughout the way, and I found out that King Arthur is my favorite. I like the unbleached flour, and I love their wheat flour as well. And I do love grinding my own grains. I am still trying to incorporate using my whole wheat berries. I have hard white wheat berries, and I also have soft white wheat berries. I'm just slowly incorporating that into our diet because Hubs isn't a big fan yet, but I'll get him there. I just let those rise until they're about a few inches over the ridge of the baking glass. And then I'll bake the bread at 375 for 40 minutes. And this is what the buns look like with the little crisscrosses. And I'm excited. They turned out really pretty looking. And they didn't fall over to the sides. So it was kind of like an anchor for them just to stay put. So I will be doing that again in the future. So I have the bread in the oven, and I'm gonna get started on dinner. So I dug into the pantry for a couple sides. I have some black beans from 23. I also have some applesauce from 25. And this is just a jar full of cornbread in a mix. And I'm just adding some sugar, olive oil, and baking powder to that mix. So right now I'm starting on the chicken. I'm filleting it out, and I'm gonna make big fillets. So then when it comes time to having leftovers, I can just split them in half and put them in a little chicken patty with the buns that I made. And that would make a perfect, quick, easy dinner for when I have to work all day or when we are on the go. It's definitely a healthier alternative to any fast food chicken, but I just know that I feel better that I know what I'm feeding my husband and I. So here I have the black beans, and I also have chicken bouillon spice along with those garlic scapes. And then I mixed all the cornbread ingredients, and I'm gonna get it in my pan. I did put a little parchment paper in there, so I can just slip it out of there and put it in a little container for leftovers. My husband and I really love cornbread, and the way my grandma used to make it, she'd put a tablespoon of coconut oil or beef tallow in it, and it was so amazing. That was just a box mix that needed to get used up, and I had put it in a jar just for storage, and I did put a tablespoon of coconut oil in there. The bread is finally finished baking, and I'm gonna keep one out for the week and put the other one in the freezer. And finally, dinner is done, and then the chicken with the beans and the applesauce and the cornbread, that was so amazing. It was definitely a wonderful comfort meal. I try to check my pantry every week and make sure my storage squash is not getting all squishy and everything. This looks like it turned a nice orange color. It started off really bright green, so I figured it was time to use it up. I cut it open. It was really hard, so it was storing really great. I'm really excited about that. So we keep our house at about 65 during the day and 60 at night. So that is on the border of being too warm of your storage. You want it to be a little bit lower than that, but these squash seem to be doing amazing. A root cellar is generally maintained at a temperature between 32 and 40. The ideal range is that. Optimal conditions, the colder the better. And you can actually have your pantry or your larder at about 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So on this night, I decided to make a squash soup, and I'm also going to be making some sweetbread with it. Whatever's left over. I have cowboy butter here from Kinder's. I also have 2 quarts of chicken bone broth that I made this year. And I also have a stick of butter and some raw milk. So I'm just going to add a half a stick of butter and let that melt in there. And then I'm going to start adding my ingredients. Every time I do a soup, I usually just wing it, but I'll try to give you the measurements for this, as it turned out so delicious. I'm adding 3 cups of the buttercup squash, and then I have 2 quarts of the turkey/chicken bone broth that I had just made a couple videos ago. And Tigger is, I think he has an alarm every time I grab the milk. He wants some, but it makes him sick, so he cannot have any. He's such a stinker butt. So I'm adding about a cup of that raw milk and my spice that I had. And I was thinking that I should add more than that, so I decided to grab my chicken bouillon. You can't go wrong with that when you're making a soup, especially when the base is a chicken turkey bone broth. So I'm getting that all mixed up. And I am adding some of my homegrown spices. I have some basil and sage that are going in. And I'm just giving that a stir, and I'm going to let that marinate for a little bit. And I was looking through the fridge and I found some of this processed kale that I had jarred up a while ago, and we had it for a different meal earlier. So I'm just going to add that to the mix, and it is pretty much done. I'm just going to cook it until it boils for at least 5-10 minutes, and I'm going to start on making these grilled cheese sandwiches. And I'm using a Monterey Jack that I had made back in June. As you can see, we've been chiseling away on it. It actually turned from a hard cheese to a mild soft cheese, so I thought that was interesting. And it had like a Swiss cheese flavor. It was so delicious, especially with the butter and the homemade bread. It really made the meal. So this is what we had for dinner on this night, and I'm glad we got to use up that buttercup squash. And for dessert that night, Hubs requested that I had take out the chocolate chip cookie dough from the freezer. I had rolled them into little balls to make it more convenient for us, and I am going to be doing that from now on. That is the first time I had done that, and it is so much easier than just cutting from the big block of cookie dough. So that's my plan, and I'm sticking to it. I cook these for about 15 minutes. It's about 2 tablespoons of dough for each cookie, and they turned out so delicious, and they're ooey gooey in the middle, And we definitely enjoyed this after that soup and grilled cheese sandwich. On this night, we got down to basics, and I am making a baked macaroni and cheese. And I'm using the Cheshire cheese that I made in September of last year. And I'm going to be adding a little bit of chopped ham to it. I already boiled some noodles to a little bit just under al dente because they're going to be baked. So I got them pre-cooked. And then I have some raw milk here. And we're going to get this all shredded up. I'm just going to shred the whole thing. I cut it in 4 pieces. The big Cheshire cheese, it was 4 pounds, so I cut that in 4 pieces. So this is about a pound of cheese that I'm shredding up. I made this particular cheese with the store-bought milk, so it was highly processed. But I think next time I make it, I really would love to make it with the raw milk that I get from the farm stand down the street. So I think I will have to put that on my list for to-dos for soon. So here I just have 1 whole stick of butter melted, and then I have about 3 tablespoons of regular all-purpose flour. And this is just what you call a roux. And I also have some salt and pepper here. I'm just going to throw that in and get the flour taste kind of cooked out, because you don't want it to be starchy, because it's already going to be pretty starchy with all the noodles and whatnot. So I get that all mixed up. That is going to be the thickener. Pretty much the base of your mac and cheese is a roux. So I have about 2 cups of milk going in, and then I have half of that cheese, and I did reserve half for the top. I'm just going to cook this low and slow, and it's going to melt and become very velvety. So this is what you want your cheese to look like for your mac and cheese. And that looks super delicious. And now I'm just adding about a cup of my chopped ham. I figured that would taste pretty good and it would give it a different kind of flavor. And I'm probably going to add breadcrumbs at the end when I put it in the oven, because I like a nice crunch on top. So I'm just adding 4 cups of noodles, because that's what it ended up being. And it makes a really nice thick casserole pan of this. So you can put the leftovers in the freezer if it's just you, or just you and your hubs. I'll probably end up having leftovers in the next couple of days, because this is one of my favorite dishes ever. So I'm just filling up this pan. I did grease it with butter so it won't stick when I'm trying to pop it out on a later date. I'm getting that all even there, and I'm going to sprinkle the reserved cheese that I had shredded along with about a cup of breadcrumbs. So I forgot to show me adding the breadcrumbs, but I did add a cup of Italian seasoning breadcrumbs, and I baked it for about 45 minutes at 350 degrees. My favorite way to use up leftover squash is by making sweetbread or cupcakes with it. When I bake sweetbread, I usually make it worth my while, and I make 2 loaves. So for this bread, I'm going to be adding 2 cups of buttercup squash, and I'm just measuring out just to see if I have 2 cups, and I do. It's just a little bit over, and that is fine. So if I'm really lazy, I'll just pop this into a cake pan and bake as is. And then you can frost it with some homemade buttercream, and that would be delicious as well. So I have 4 eggs going in the mix. And my chickens have been laying like crazy, so they are just working machines this winter. I got about a teaspoon of molasses, because then I'm going to add the sugar, and that's going to be my brown sugar. Then I have a cup of oil going in. That's just a half a cup that I have there. And then I'm going to add 2 cups of sugar. I love using different pumpkins, and I've used sweet potato for sweetbread. That was actually one of my favorite sweetbreads, is a sweet potato sweetbread. And here I'm just adding 3 cups of flour. And when I measure out the batter, I get like 1,700 in each pan, so that gives you an idea. I kind of make it a little bit even because I want 2 nice fluffy loaves of sweetbread. And I just added a teaspoon of salt and then 4 teaspoons of baking powder. And then you can also spice it up with a little cinnamon. I'm going to be adding about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. I've also used pumpkin spice in the past, or you can use a little bit of nutmeg and ginger and cinnamon. That would be delicious as well. So I'm just going to look at the recipe and make sure I got everything. I'm pretty sure I got everything, and give it a good mix. I got my oven preheating at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course I have my little helper here. He always watches and makes sure nothing falls on the ground. He's my little vacuum cleaner. So I'm just gonna pour equal amounts. It's usually around 1,700 grams each. And then I'm gonna pop these in the oven for about 60 minutes. How I usually test it is I just poke a knife all the way through the bottom, and if it comes out clean, it's done. And if it comes out with some batter, I give it another 5 minutes. I just keep adding 5 minutes until it is fully done and it passes the knife test. They definitely turned out a really beautiful color, and I'm super excited for that. We're gonna enjoy these for snacks and breakfasts. And then I'm gonna pop one in the freezer for later, and we are gonna enjoy a little bit right now. We also did a few homestead chores. I did a deep cleaning of the house, and the hubs was nice enough to come out and do the chicken coop. And that's it, friends. That's all I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's video and a look into our homestead and how we do a lot of the things we do here. And I hope you have a blessed week, and I will see you on the next one, friends.